On a crisp morning in September 1066, the green fields of Yorkshire were set to witness the end of an era. Warriors crossing from the North Sea collided with England's shield walls in a battle so intense and unexpected that a Viking dream of conquest was shattered in a single day. This was more than a fight for land. It was a clash between two worlds, the fading age of the Norse raiders and the rising tide of medieval kingship. The sea that morning lay calm, but the horizon was far from empty. From the gray morning mist, a forest of sails emerged, blotting out the sun like ghostly apparitions. At the prows were carvings of legendary Norse beasts, snarling dragons, coiling serpents, and raven-headed figureheads that seemed to watch the shore with hungry eyes. This was no ordinary raid. It was an invasion. At the forefront of the fleet stood Harald Sigurdsson Hardrada, king of Norway, his banner, the Landwaster, fluttering in the wind. Hardrada was not merely a king. He was a warrior forged in fire. Having once fought with the Byzantine Varangian Guard, he returned laden with gold and sharpened by decades of battle. Beside him, on another longship, sailed Tostig Godwin's son, exiled Earl of Northumbria and younger brother to England's King Harold. Tostig's eyes burned not with loyalty to Norway, but with the cold fire of personal revenge. Cast out by his own people and rejected by his brother, he had found in Hardrada's campaign the perfect outlet for his hatred. The fleet consisted of over 300 longships, some say nearly 350, carrying around 8,000 men, warriors and male, archers with quivers of arrows, and soldiers wielding axes. The oar struck the sea in perfect rhythm, echoing across the waves like a war drum. They glided into the Humber River with practiced precision, slipping into England's watery arteries. Villages along the banks were set aflame, smoke curling into the sky as the Norsemen pushed inland. The Norse faced their first real test on September 20th at Fulford Gate. The English, led by Edwin of Mercia and Morcar of Northumbria, attempted to halt their advance. The battle was brutal and swift. The northern shield wall absorbed the English assault and then surged forward, breaking their line. Many drowned while fleeing through marshes, while others fell where they stood. York, the jewel of the north, had no choice but to surrender. Hardrada emerged victorious. The northern kingdom was his, at least in name. He demanded hostages and supplies, planning to consolidate his control before marching south to claim the English crown. Yet, in the warm glow of victory, he made a fatal misjudgment. He believed Harold Godwin's son was still tied to the south, watching for the Norman threat along the coast. The truth was far more dangerous. When the news reached King Harold Godwin's son, he was not in the north. He was stationed on England's southern coast, eyes fixed on the gray waters of the Channel, awaiting William of Normandy's invasion. For weeks, his army had stood ready along the shore, yet no fleet had appeared. Then the message arrived. The north was burning. York had fallen. Earls Edwin and Morcar had been defeated. Norway's banner now flew over England's second city. For most kings, the choice would have been political. Send envoys, bide time, prepare carefully. But Harold Godwin's son was no ordinary king. His blood boiled with urgency, sharpened by the knowledge that the invaders were not strangers. Among them was his own brother, Tostig, a traitor to crown and kin alike. Harold made his decision instantly. He would march north, and he would march immediately. What followed was one of medieval military history's most remarkable feats of endurance. Harold gathered his armored full-time warriors and local levies. Banners were raised, spears hoisted on shoulders. From London to York, nearly 185 miles, they marched in just 4 days. They slept little, ate on the move, boots pounding dirt roads from dawn to dusk. Rain soaked their woolen cloaks, yet the column never slowed. On the morning of September 25th, 1066, Hardrada and his men lounged near the village of Stamford Bridge under the warm sun. Many had left their armor back in York. The air was calm, the river gentle. Then a cloud of dust rose on the horizon. The ground trembled with the rhythm of marching feet and pounding hooves. It was not the wind, it was Harold. The Vikings had not expected a battle that day. The sun was warm, the grass tall, and the air carried the lazy stillness of September. Hardrada's men lounged along the river Derwent, Some repaired equipment, others played dice, and many were without armor. The heavy mail shirts had been left behind in York with the ships. At first, there was a faint hum in the distance, but it quickly grew into the thunder of marching feet and pounding hooves. A Viking scout sprinted in from the horizon, shouting, "The English are coming!" Panic rippled through the Norse camp as warriors scrambled to seize their shields and axes. A towering Viking armed with a massive axe stood alone in the middle of the bridge. Time and again he faced the advancing English vanguard, splitting shield and skulls, buying precious minutes for his comrades. He held the position for nearly an hour. His defeat came not through brute force but cunning. An English soldier slipped beneath the bridge and thrust a spear upward, striking the lone defender down. Once the bridge was cleared, Harold's army poured across. The Viking line was still forming on the far bank, a patchwork of armored and bare-chested warriors. The first clash hit like thunder. Spears shattered, swords flashed, and men grappled on the blood-slicked grass. Hardrada, cloak flying, fought at the heart of the line, cutting down foes with sweeping sword blows. After hours of combat, a moment that would echo through history occurred. Harold Hardrada surged forward in a furious charge, only to be struck in the throat by an English arrow piercing a gap in his armor. As he fell, the great Raven of Norway, the land-washed banner, dipped toward the ground. Harold offered his brother mercy. "You may have your lands back. I will pardon you. Stand down." Tostig refused. The fighting continued. Soon, Tostig lay dead as well. The Norse line collapsed, and many Vikings fled toward the ships at Rickcall, only to be hunted down by English cavalry. Of the once great army, only a fraction survived. The age of Viking invasions had come to an end, yet Harold Godwinson's victory came at a heavy price. His men were exhausted and diminished, and grim news arrived from the south. William of Normandy had landed. Immediately after his victory, Harold Godwinson regrouped his army and marched south with weary soldiers. Their objective, to confront and halt the Norman invasion. As they advanced, the troops bore not only the fatigue of battle, but also the sorrow for comrades lost at Stamford Bridge. The roads were dusty and the march exhausting, yet Harold's determination pushed the army forward. Swords were strapped on again, spears readied, and the English forces moved, carrying the spirit of their northern victory with them. Villagers watched the passing of this massive host in awe and fear. Each step brought them closer to the battle that would decide England's future, the Battle of Hastings. In everyone's minds, one question lingered. Would the Normans be ready, or could they withstand the determination of the English army? By the time Harold reached the southern coast with his exhausted army, he learned the exact positions of William's forces. Now, not only speed and strength, but also tactical cunning and endurance would determine the outcome. The fate of England rested upon this impending clash. When Harold's army reached the south, they saw William's Norman forces ready. Swords gleamed along the coast, and restless horses pawed at the ground. Harold's men, still carrying the exhilaration and exhaustion from Stamford Bridge, readied themselves to confront the enemy. As the two armies closed in, the English secured a strategic hill, giving their shield wall a strong defensive position. The Normans tried repeatedly to break the English lines using various assault tactics, their archers raining arrows like a storm from above. The battle raged for hours. Swords clashed, spears shattered, and men and horses fought in the same chaotic melee. The English held firm, but fatigue and the relentless Norman attacks increased the pressure. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and the battlefield was soaked in blood. Harold, leading with courage, directed his soldiers throughout the fight. In the battle's critical moment, the English king was struck by arrows and killed. His fall shattered the morale of the English army, and resistance quickly collapsed. The Normans claimed victory, and England's fate now rested in the hands of a new ruler. The Battle of Hastings reshaped England's political landscape. The age of Viking invasions had ended, and Norman rule had begun. Harold Godwinson's efforts, his victory at Stamford Bridge, and his courage would not be forgotten, but England was entering a new era. History would carry the legacy of these two pivotal battles for generations. Stamford Bridge demonstrated the strength of English resistance and the importance of swift decision-making. Hastings reminded the world that change is inevitable and that the fate of a nation can sometimes be decided in a single battle. The year 1066 marked a turning point in English history. Courage, strategy, and fate converged to determine the future of a nation. And these stories continue to be told, studied, and remembered to this day.